Have you ever used a gun in Destiny and thought, man, this thing is bad, why did they waste their time even making this? Well, chances are there's often a reason. In this video I'll be using Mark Rosewater's When Good Cards Go Bad article to help explain a bunch of weird concepts from the game design world. If you haven't guessed by now, yes, this will be a video where I relate the card game Magic the Gathering to Destiny. In the article, Mark Rosewater was asked rather bluntly, why does research and design print ridiculously bad cards and sets, particularly as rares? After a bit of back and forward correspondence, Mark ended up writing down a 7-point list. They are as follows. All the cards can't be good. Different cards appeal to different players. Diversity of card power is key to discovery. Power levels are relative. Diversity of power rewards the more skilled player. People like finding hidden gems. Research and design is only human. So let's start out with this first point here. All the cards can't be good. This is listed as the most important point in the article since the power of a card or a gun in Destiny is entirely relative. A gun is only a god roll until something better comes along for you. As an example, Fatebringer was probably the best gun of Destiny 1, so everyone rejoiced when it was returning in Year 3, because we all remember that incredible power. Well, 2 years of new weapons being added and a few changes to the sandbox, and we saw Fatebringer return to a world where it certainly was not the best thing anymore. Many better things have come along, and the world that Fatebringer was king in has changed a little bit. So while its old properties were still good, they weren't the best thing out there. That could be said for a plethora of weapons that returned in Year 3. Remember the Devil You Know, Lord High Fixer, the Swarm, the Longbow, Shadow Price in their prime? All of them are still standout weapons when they came back, but there are just straight up better versions out there now. You're probably asking, well, what about the other guns? The ones that were never good, the ones that we all laughed at because they were so bad. There's two answers there in my opinion. When we add more things into the game, we get meta shifts and more options for other players. New playstyles can also develop from this. The best example I can give of that would be No Land Beyond. My first impressions of that gun were laughable. There was no way this thing would ever be good. Then sidearms were introduced to the game, which paired very well with No Land Beyond. Then sidearms were improved, and a few more changes to No Land Beyond, and now it's one of the most powerful weapons in the PvP realm because it has other weapons to pair with its unique features. The other answer is towards the weapons that never got the No Land Beyond treatment. The Devil You Don't, Anguish of Dryston, Zali's Bane, all of these guns were never considered good. Usually these types of guns are in archetypes that aren't that competitive. For variety's sake though, if every hand cannon was the same archetype, then it would get kind of boring to use them, and everything would feel the same. The power level of weapons is also something to consider here. The term power creep is used often when describing this. Basically, if every new gun added to the game was better than an older one, it would invalidate all older content, while also creating a larger gap in the power level of each player. So instead, we have the system where every release we get a healthy swath of weapons that are all at varying levels of power. This kind of leads into the second point of the article. Different cards appeal to different players. As an example, I personally never liked auto rifles. They weren't really that competitive for me, and I didn't feel like they were allowing me to play the way that I wanted to play. I like individually firing my shots because it makes me feel like I'm choosing where to place my bullets rather than just send a stream of them effortlessly to a location. I enjoy the higher skill versus reward that semi-auto weapons can give. Does that make auto rifles bad? No, it just means that they aren't my thing. Other players love their auto rifles for all the reasons that I listed as negatives. When you have all of these different weapons and archetypes, it increases the variety of not only the guns available, but the number of people who can find a gun that really speaks to their playstyle. Even if that playstyle isn't competitive, it's the one that causes them to gain the most enjoyment out of the game. And that's what all this is about anyway. Games are meant to be enjoyed, unless you play Crash Bandicoot or Dark Souls. An example of this would be someone picking their loadout for Axis. The optimal DPS heavy weapon would be Dark Drinker, or a God Roll rocket launcher with cluster bombs. Someone who isn't very concerned with doing optimal DPS might choose Dragon's Breath because the flavor value of killing the giant spider thing with fire is just too good to pass up. Weapons are sometimes made to be silly, or to just fulfill an idea that the developers maybe had. Sometimes that is unbelievably successful. Xalos Supercell was made to make you feel like you're shooting lightning from your gun, and is also the straight up best PvE primary if you're having to kill multiple enemies. Icebreaker was made with the idea of, well, what if you never had to pick up sniper rifle ammo? Well, that was an experiment that worked, and Bungie knows that you can't have a weapon like that and also expect to have an ammo economy that can be balanced in PvP. Same thing with Universal Remote and No Land Beyond. I'm kind of straying from the point here. All the weapons mentioned appeal to very different player types. Sometimes that leads to making a weapon that's made with the competitive player in mind. Sometimes that leads to a fun gun that makes stuff explode. Sometimes the silly gun that they thought would be really niche turns out to be the best thing in the game and used by everyone. Mark made a great point in this section where he said, the problem is people tend to define bad cards as cards they personally see no reason to play. But certain cards aren't meant for them in the first place. I think that sums it up nicely. The third section gets into some of the more important parts of a game as large as Magic, and by extension Destiny. Diversity of card power is key to discovery. Well, what the hell does that even mean? Discovery in a game is often one of the most important parts because it creates memorable experiences. Not the physical act of running around and discovering new parts of a location, but the act of gaining knowledge and understanding how something works. The best way to illustrate this is to just ask you to go back into your Destiny history. Was there a time where you were reading a weapons perk and thought, oh, that would work really great with this armor piece, or something to that effect? That's the type of discovery that I'm talking about. The more educated you are on a game and how things work in it, the more you're going to see a weapon or perk selection and say that it's bad. However, a newer player may not know that. This could lead them to try out that gun and come to the same conclusion, or maybe they end up liking some other quality of that weapon, like that archetype or the equip speed. Having that large diversity and power level of weapons will help aid in this discovery process. You're also probably asking, well, who needs discovery when we have the internet? I can just type in any gun name into YouTube and get an X out of 10 review score. Well, you are indeed right. For those who wish to seek out this type of information, it does negate that act of discovery. But for every person watching one of those videos, there are 10 who never look up any information about the game. So no matter how bad a gun may seem, I can guarantee it led to a better experience for someone because it was the catalyst for them to seek more knowledge about the game. I've already kind of went over the fourth point of power levels are relative when going over the first point, so I won't repeat myself about how a meta shift can cause something that was bad to become good. I will, however, say that it's important to note the format that you're playing in will oftentimes determine that particular power level. As an example, my go-to primary is a palindrome that aims to be just as consistent as possible with rangefinder, rifled barrel, and Icarus. That is a very high power level for a weapon for PvP on a hunter. However, that same weapon is on a pretty mediocre power level in PvE, since you want more utility in that format. I'd much rather have a damage bump from reactive reload or a magazine increase from something like triple tap, and even an entirely different archetype of hand cannon, something like the First Curse. The fifth point is that diversity in power levels will reward the more skilled player. People like being rewarded for the time that they put into the game, so having higher power level weapons available to those that say complete hard activities like Outbreak Prime, or choose to chase god rolls for certain weapons like the Aes Luna will help achieve that. This point also goes back to weapons being a tool to help the discovery aspect of players. If someone is using a weapon that they believe to be good in a format where it isn't, this will allow for that moment of discovery, however brutal that is. Whether it be in PvP where you're getting outgunned by someone with a better hand cannon, or wondering why your good PvP weapon isn't performing well in PvE when you need to kill a lot of enemies and your gun is designed for 1v1 combat. The more knowledge and skill a player is allowed to discover, the more they will stand to benefit from having that large variety of weapons at their disposal. The sixth point is probably the most fun one. People like finding hidden gems. It brings all of the points from the article together because it means you've discovered enough things to have high knowledge base to then recognize when something is really good good for you. Hidden gems personally mean that you find a weapon that will be perfect for what you want to do. There are some hidden gems that get found in the community like the Godroll Warpath for Axis, but most of the time I see people talking in comments section or stream chat about their favorite weird rolls or exotics. Most of them don't appeal to me, but they're adamant that they will never give up their favorite scout or non-competitive exotic. The seventh and most final point is what I believe to be the most important one. Research and design is only human. Oftentimes people forget that there are people working on the game. Mistakes happen, like A's Luna's never dropping. There are often fixes through patches or new tools that can get added to the game that allow them to design mechanics in a more specific manner, like how the range stat in Year 1 was largely a throwaway, but in Taken King and Rise of Iron the tools were refined more that allowed them to make that range stat actually affect the fall-off damage, in addition to the way aim assist interacted with the weapon. The other thing is, sometimes the idea for a weapon simply isn't particularly effective. Dragon's Breath is a really interesting idea for a weapon, but outside of solar burns, it just doesn't perform well. Same thing with things like Telesto, Patience and Time, or No Time to Explain. None of these guns are particularly bad, and the ideas behind them are based in some pretty interesting player fantasies. Even though the end result isn't particularly successful or competitive, we wouldn't know unless the developers had actually tried. I hope you found the thoughts in this video helpful to some degree. If you did, a positive rating would be appreciated. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.